The notice lit up my screen at 9:13 a.m., heavier than the entire $2.3 billion deal I'd sealed just 48 hours earlier. Subject line: compensation adjustment. I clicked, half expecting a bonus confirmation. Instead, the first line stabbed, effective immediately. Your base salary is reduced by 56%, and your role is reassigned to junior market analyst, pay grade 5. My pulse smashed against my ribs, a dull drum drowning the office hum. For 5 years, I had stalked that drone fleet contract across 14 countries. Dusty hangars in Dubai, icy tarmacs in Winnipeg, overnight train rides through Bavaria where economy coffee tasted like burnt pennies. Every customs stamp meant another inch toward the podium where Victor Dane, our freshly minted 30-something CEO, bragged about my victory. He'd shaken my hand for the cameras, teeth gleaming, then vanished before the ink dried. Now his digital signature lounged beneath my demotion like a smirk. I inhaled, tasted static, and forced my fingers to stay steady. No reply. Not yet. I forwarded the email to Madison Pierce, my securities attorney, with a single word: executed. We had prepared for this exact betrayal 6 months ago over cold Chardonnay in Georgetown. She would know what switch to flip. I watched Office TV replay yesterday's contract signing, my grin. His victory pose, shareholders clapping like trained seals. The irony stung. Headlines still praised my deal while the company erased my name. Screensaver reflections pulsed on the glass, proof of how light flips to shadow in seconds, utterly sudden and effortless. Around me, cubicle chatter continued, staples clicking, someone laughing at a meme, proof the world hadn't noticed the floor opening beneath my chair. That anonymity was a gift. Rage is most useful when nobody sees it coming. A second notification blinked. Victor had blind copied the entire board, attaching a spreadsheet labeled Phase 1 Downsizing, Immediate Wins. My name sat at row 1. Column A, highlighted corporate red. He even added a smiley face in the email body. The message ended. This is how we show Wall Street we're serious. Blood rushed to my ears, hot and metallic. Serious? I just hoisted net access to number 1 in market share. He thought shrinking my paycheck would shrink my spine. I closed the message, opened a blank notebook page, and wrote the countdown number, 24. By the time it hit 0, Victor would redefine serious, on his knees, begging for a lifeline he could have left intact. By 10:01 a.m., I had already pulled the mirror trust binder from the gunmetal safe hidden behind my father's faded Marine Corps flag. The steel was cool, my pulse was ice, and the panic that had boiled minutes earlier settled into something harder. Granite resolve. A copier jammed somewhere. Nobody looked up. Outside my window, the Potomac shimmered under a brittle sun, indifferent to corporate betrayals. A single whiff of jasmine paper carried me back 6 months to that cramped cafe off Wisconsin Avenue. The Georgetown espresso tasted burnt. Madison Pierce's humor was sharper than the knives on the wall menu, and the rain kept smearing the window like gray watercolor. Madison's wet wool blazer still haunted my nostrils. We sat shoulder to shoulder, annotating a term sheet no one inside NetAxis would bother to read. Madison, securities law prodigy and recovering lawyer, whispered the name like a code phrase, mirror trust, and I just nodded. Funding it had been easier than convincing myself to do it. I redirected 60% of my past success fees into an LLC with no public tie to me. 3 silent angels, an ex-colonel, a widowed venture banker, and the drone supplier's CFO matched every dollar. When the smoke cleared, the trust owned 51% of a brand new Series C class that carried full voting rights, yet masqueraded as an incentive pool. Sleight of hand, courtesy of Madison, every contingency we feared. We wrote into stone. Arrogance would supply the activation energy. Flipping to page 47. I reread the trigger clause, murmuring every word. If Reagan Whitlock's salary is reduced by 50% or more, or if her position is downgraded without a two-thirds board vote, all Series C voting power transfers to Mirror Trust 24 hours from notice. The ink seemed to hum, patient as a coiled spring finally invited to move. Reality jabbed deeper. Clipped to the next divider lay my mother's pre-op cardiology statement. Valve replacement. Projected hospital cost $426,000. Insurance would cover 80%, unless my new pay grade bumped me into the bargain plan with the monstrous deductible. Victor hadn't just clipped my wings, he'd swung at my family's heartbeat. I logged into the internal payroll dashboard to verify my demotion and froze. Carver, Liu, and Brandt, stalwarts who had bled for net axis, had been sliced by exactly 55% at 9:09 a.m. Victor wasn't pruning a budget. He was poisoning the well before tomorrow's earnings call. My jaw tightened. Madison once told me justice is a glacier, slow, inevitable, unstoppable. Cold determination flooded every vein, replacing adrenaline with strategy. Failure was gone. Only timeline remained. The clock kept ticking, relentlessly. I closed the binder, set the countdown to 23 hours, 57 minutes, and whispered, "Let it freeze!" The afternoon crawled so heavily that every keystroke sounded like a sledgehammer. I let the office phone ring, and ring. Human resources, legal compliance, even the executive assistant's extension, all begging to talk. I answered none of them. Silence. Right now was leverage. The cubicles around me felt strung tighter than violin wire. People who normally waved when passing my desk pretended to read non-existent emails. A junior dev knocked over her water bottle and flinched like it was a grenade. Word travels faster than official memos. They had seen Victor's spreadsheet and knew a storm was forming around it. Everyone wondered which direction the lightning would hit. I logged into the investor relations portal, my fingers oddly steady despite the tremor in my stomach. A new post appeared under corporate governance. Notice of voting transfer. In 2 crisp paragraphs, I announced that, pursuant to Series C provisions, all controlling votes would shift to Mirror Trust in 24 hours, unless otherwise directed. Below the text. A scarlet countdown timer began at 11:59 p.m. and ticked downward in real time. Visitors could almost hear it throb. Within minutes, the internal chat lit up with questions I had no intention of answering today. At 3:20 p.m., CFO Helena Ortiz appeared at the edge of my cubicle. Cheeks flushed, breath shallow. Without a word, she slipped a matte black USB drive onto my keyboard. "Travel audits," she whispered. "You'll want line items 17 through 30. Then she was gone, swallowed by the uneasy maze of partitions. I pocketed the device like contraband. If Victor had padded expense reports while hacking salaries, that hypocrisy would devastate him far worse than any clause. But anxiety kept stacking, brick on brick. As the sun dipped, orange reflections danced on the conference room glass, looking like flames licking the building. My cell buzzed. The only call I could never ignore. "Mom." I stepped into an empty huddle room and answered, forcing cheer into my voice. She apologized for bothering me, then explained the hospital had postponed next week's valve replacement. My pay reclassification downgraded the insurance tier, and the pre-authorization vanished overnight. They would reschedule once paperwork stabilized. Maybe. Her voice cracked. Mine did too. But I muffled it with a cough. I promised I'd fix everything, quickly. Then ended the call before fear bled into my words. I returned to my desk. The countdown read 7:47 p.m. Ticking. Ticking. Amplifying every worry under the fluorescent lights. Somewhere, a Slack notification pinged. Any leadership update? I closed the laptop, slid the USB into my jacket, and stared at the clock. 19 hours felt like a century and a millisecond at once. Anxiety layered over determination. Each breath a negotiation between terror and necessary patience. Unyielding resolve. Night hammered Arlington with sheets of rain. Yet my office monitors glowed ruthlessly until 1:40 a.m. The building's motion sensors had surrendered, leaving only my cube and the exit signs blinking in puddled reflections. Madison Pierce joined by encrypted Zoom. Hoodie up, eyes fox sharp. I slid Helena's matte USB into the port. The drive light pulsed red like a silent alarm. "Ready?" she murmured. We decrypted line items one by one. Business class tickets upgraded on landing. Hotel suites extended for weather delays that never existed. A $14,000 seafood tab in Macau marked client entertainment. Victor had made greed boringly predictable. Still, we copied everything into a hidden folder labeled trombone lessons and agreed to keep the evidence sheathed until the perfect crescendo, while Madison scrubbed metadata. I drafted a midnight bulletin for the intranet. Subject, unlock sequence. The body contained 4 sentences, each shorter than a threat. Read your contract. Read clause 47. Read the timer. Read what happens when it strikes 0. I scheduled the post for 6:30 a.m. The hour caffeine meets anxiety. Lightning cracked outside, throwing lattice shadows across my desk. The tremor in my fingers resurfaced. This time not from fear, but from the call I had to place. Mom answered on the second ring, her voice already apologizing for disturbing me. I kept the camera angled high, so she couldn't see the chaos of spreadsheets behind me. I lied gently, told her the salary glitch was temporary. The surgery deposit already wired. The rain just background noise. She believed me because she needed to, and I needed her not to worry. When we hung up, the guilt sat heavier than the storm cloud. Slack pinged. Junior analyst Danny. Vic invited me to tomorrow's loyalty dinner. Mind if I wear a wire? Brave kid. I gave her a thumbs-up emoji and instructions on how to place her phone in a hollowed memo pad. Evidence breeds faster than rumors when you feed it purpose. Madison returned, brow furrowed. "One more thing," she said, pushing her glasses higher. "If Victor files any dispute before the countdown ends, the SEC can issue an emergency hold. Mirror trust voting rights could be frozen for weeks." A cold knot formed in my gut. The plan was still intact, yet suddenly fragile, like glassware vibrating on a train table. I saved the new risk to my mental ledger, shut off the overhead fluorescence, and let the faint hum of servers accompany the rain's relentless percussion. Outside, sirens wailed toward the interstate. Water sloshed through overflowing gutters. And I realized this building had become my trench. Leaving now would mean abandoning the battlefield before sunrise, a luxury my timeline didn't allow in this silent electric siege tonight. At 7:12 a.m. the next morning, Danny's quivering voice memo landed in my inbox, wrapped in diner line static. "He says he'll purge every drop of old blood," she whispered. Then the recording cut to Victor's booming laugh as silverware clinked. He bragged about clearing dead wood before the earnings call, rattling off departments like expletives, contracts, compliance, legacy, R&D. My stomach folded. I saved the clip to a hidden folder marked Valves and Venom and encrypted a cloud backup. Grenades need safe storage until you can aim them. Market alerts chimed a minute later. Net Axis stock opened 3% down, the digital chart bleeding red bars across my second monitor. Even through tempered glass, I could sense the hallway rumor mill spinning. People lingered near printers, hushed, scrolling their phones. A senior engineer I'd mentored for a decade avoided eye contact, as if loyalty were contagious. Then my private Gmail lit up. Subject line, Opportunity, Atlas Defense. A tidy PDF followed. Vice President of Strategic Systems. 8 million in stock options vesting immediately. Relocation stipend. Decision required by midnight. The salary alone would cover Mom's cardiac valve replacement twice over and still fund Danny's grad school. For a moment, I imagined a clean exit. No board fights, no midnight stress fractures, just a new badge and a sigh of relief. The fantasy lasted 7 breaths. I opened a blank pros and cons sheet and stared. On one tab sat my mother's postponed surgery estimate. Interest inching upward each day, insurance stalled. On another sat the pension projections for my 46 direct reports, the people Victor planned to purge. Leaving would feel like abandoning them on a sinking ship after I'd promised rescue. Staying risked everything if Mirror Trust failed, but leaving guaranteed Victor's triumph, as if the universe sensed my hesitation. A signal notification bloomed. SEC has accepted Victor's petition to review trust voting transfer. Countdown paused pending inquiry. No signature. Only an IP pinging somewhere inside the beltway. I flipped to the investor portal. The Ruby timer that had been shredding seconds since yesterday now froze at 18:04 and 20 seconds. Static filled my ears louder than Danny's recording. I stared at the frozen numbers, willing them to move. An HR email scheduled my reassignment orientation for 2:00 p.m. A calendar tombstone. My cursor hovered over Atlas's accept button, trembling like a compass caught between poles, measuring obligation against oxygen and uncertain personal redemption. By 9:30 p.m., I clicked decline on Atlas's offer. Revenge had to play out inside the house. For good measure, I CC'd Human Resources, knowing the forwarded thread would live forever in compliance archives. 30 seconds later, I printed the entire email chain, signed and dated the bottom of the page, and slipped it into the Mirror Trust binder. Loyalty documented, motive clarified. Madison was still in her D.C. apartment, hair in a makeshift bun, eating cereal from the box while redlining a 15-page response to the SEC. "They're questioning beneficial ownership," she said through the speaker. "So we drown them in receipts." She attached wire transfer confirmations, board minutes, and the original Series C valuation letter bearing Victor's flamboyant signature. I reviewed each exhibit, initialed digitally, and watched her send the packet to the commission at 10:24 p.m. with a subject line that left no wiggle room: non-controlling executive remedy documentation. Urgent. My own screen displayed a dashboard of scheduled press releases. Using a dead man switch service, I programmed 3 bulletins, 1 to business media, 1 to the engineering trade press, and 1 to an investigative podcast notorious for shredding corporate reputations. All 3 would publish automatically if Mirror Trust status flipped to restricted. I tested the trigger twice, ensuring the embargo clocks counted down in silence. Then came rehearsal. I stood in the dim conference room, fluorescent lights off, city glow bleeding through the blinds. On the giant monitor, I projected the apology Victor would be forced to read. 4 paragraphs, 79 words, no wiggle room. I practiced delivering it myself, searching for weaknesses he might exploit. Too long a pause, a sentence he could skip, an adjective that cushioned accountability. Each time I finished, I shortened the script, honed the blade. Worst-case scenarios reeled across my mind. Victor filing an injunction at dawn. The board claiming fiduciary breach. The SEC freezing the shares until next quarter. Instead of slowing me, the possibilities hardened resolve like repeated strikes on iron. At 11:56 p.m., my phone vibrated. A single encrypted ping from Madison. "Approved! Clock live!" I refreshed the investor portal. The crimson timer leapt back to life, but its digits had lost half a day. 8:59 a.m. and falling. 9 hours to 0, somewhere below. The cleaning crew ran vacuums, oblivious to the corporate coup humming through fiber lines above their heads. I let their noise steady my heartbeat while sketching the outline of tomorrow's battlefield. Boardroom seating, camera angles, hatches. There would be no improvisation, only execution, and every second between now and dawn belonged to preparation. 10 o'clock a.m. The live stream lights snapped on, and the boardroom smelled of scorched coffee and raw panic. 38,000 employees filled the corporate intranet, their chat bubbles scrolling like ticker tape, while 4.2 million retail shareholders joined from brokerage terminals around the world. I sat at the head of the table, hands folded, watching the numeric overlay hover in the upper left corner of every screen. Whitlock 51%, board 49%. The figure pulsed crimson. A silent siren. Victor Dane burst through the glass doors half a minute late, jacket unbuttoned, eyes blinking against the studio spots. He stopped dead when he saw the overlay, then let his gaze drift to the camera, as though the lens itself were an executioner. Sweat traced a path down his temple. I invited him to stand beside me with a minimalist gesture. The microphone detected his swallow. "Read," I said, sliding the single page across the oak. My voice sounded cool in my own ears, yet my pulse hammered every syllable. He cleared his throat and began. "I, Victor Thomas Dane, acknowledge the unjust salary reduction and demotion of Reagan Whitlock." The word unjust hung in the air like wet cement. Chat exploded with gasp emojis and a waterfall of glyphs. Somewhere in the surge, I felt an electric thrill. Authority finally manifest, though balanced on a blade. Halfway through the apology, I raised a hand, halting him. "For transparency," I announced, "please display Clause 11. Madison, watching from D.C., pushed the command. A new banner overlaid the feed. 10% equity reallocated to Fair Wage Fund, effective immediately. A collective roar surged through the chat. Cheers, crying face emojis, digital confetti. Victor's jaw slackened. He mouthed 10%, but found no sound. The triumph lasted 8 seconds. Stock alert pings erupted on my tablet. NAIAX down another 12%. Portfolio graphs plunged like ski slopes. Panic pricked the back of my neck. If the slide continued, the employee pensions tied to the company fund could vaporize before the fair wage account even opened. The flood of fire emojis now felt like sparks in dry brush. I locked eyes with the camera, forcing a steady breath. "We will stabilize," I promised the invisible audience, though a chill scraped my spine. Power coursed through the room, but it came with aftershocks I had not rehearsed. Victor resumed reading, his voice cracking on each concession, while I listened to the market tremor, praying the floor I had just claimed would not split beneath everyone I had sworn to protect. In the chat, engineers begged for reassurance, retirees cursed their screens, and interns sent frantic gifs of sinking ships. My breath sounded loud between heartbeats. When Victor's knee hit the carpet, the market began to wake. Seconds later, the New York Stock Exchange flashed a yellow banner. Trading halt, NAIX pending volatility review. Anchors on 3 business channels replayed the moment in slow motion and christened it the Neil Deal. I felt the label clang like a victory bell. But I kept breathing. Matches aren't over until the lights go out. Compliance slid the final release packet across the table. I signed in midnight blue ink, authorizing the unlock of Mirror Trust voting power. The electronic confirmation pinged at 12:31 p.m. 4 minutes after the halt lifted, the price chart sprang up like a released spring. 2%, 6, 10. Finally topping at a 15% rebound, erasing the morning carnage and casting fresh green across every ticker in Times Square. My throat tightened, half laugh, half gasp. The board convened in emergency session, eyes threading panic with awe. Chairwoman Rivera leaned in. "Reagan, Wall Street trusts you. We need you in the corner office." It sounded sweet, yet I tasted hazard. I shook her hand and chose a different weapon. "Make me executive chair. Strategy without the photo target." Unanimous approval in 7 minutes. Momentum mattered. I fired a company-wide memo. Executive bonuses above 5% suspended pending review. Fair wage fund portal live by 4:05 p.m. for all non-management staff. HR posted it, and my inbox filled with emoji applause, praying hands, a lone gif of Rocky on the courthouse steps. Relief came shallow, sprint paced. At 4:23 p.m., an unfamiliar IRC handle pinged. Glass code. The Hacktivist Collective had clipped Victor's humiliation into a 30-second montage over a bass drop and tagged it. Neil deal. Views hit 2 million before I reached the elevator. YouTube's algorithm rocketed the clip onto trending lists, comment threads exploding with calls for reform. NetAccess's media desk pleaded that I appear on live streams to calm retailers. I exhaled against the brass elevator wall, pulse echoing in my ears. Every deliberate gesture had landed. Yet the resonance kept growing, louder than any board vote, wilder than any earnings call. Breathless triumph is still triumph, I reminded myself, straightening my blazer as the doors opened toward a wholly reconfigured battlefield. Downstairs, engineers clustered around lobby TVs, cheering when the price ticker flashed green. Some wiped away tears. I waved, words failing, heart pounding like a drumline. Tomorrow would bring audits, depositions, maybe fresh attacks. Yet tonight, the air finally tasted like oxygen for the first time. By 4:30 p.m., the Fair Wage Fund had cracked $2 million, faster than the board's bouquets of praise. Our impromptu town hall livestream was already pulsing. Icons of raised hands lined the edge of the screen like runway lights. I unmuted the first caller, an avionics tech named Carlos who had spent 22 years keeping NetAccess jets flying. "Will my wife's cancer coverage survive this mess?" he asked, voice trembling between hope and dread. I answered without hedging. "Yes. The healthcare plan remains intact, and the fund will backfill any lapse until contracts catch up." The chat reacted with clapping emojis. Next came Sheila from logistics, worried about her frozen pension match. I quoted subsection 8 of the new policy, promising the match would resume at daybreak. When the applause subsided, I added, almost casually, "The fund's first disbursement covers my mother's valve surgery this Friday." Virtual confetti erupted. HR representatives watching from their cubicles sent private messages thanking me for doing what years of policy reviews never accomplished. Even a regional manager, who'd once questioned my ambition problem, typed a simple salute emoji. The ground beneath us felt suddenly, thrillingly solid again. The stream's sidebar flooded with digital hearts, prayer hands, even nostalgic gifs of factory line workers cheering beside the drones I once fought to perfect. Hope had muscle again. No apology from Victor arrived yet, but silence was louder. The surge of solidarity washed over me as warmth rather than pressure. For the first time since the pay cut email, I felt the oxygen of purposeful revenge, not spite, but restoration. Night dropped over Arlington like a theater curtain, and newsroom push alerts replaced applause. A headline from Financial Whistle stole the marquee. Atlas Defense quietly bidding for Victor Dane's exit package, not NetAccess shares. The article alleged Atlas hoped to buy Victor's golden parachute, then leverage his secrets to wedge into government drone deals. They weren't after my equity, they were after his ego. I laughed out loud in my empty office. "The bait is biting the fisherman," I told the ceiling tiles. Screens buzzed with reporter pings. I drafted one line. NetAccess wishes Atlas luck monetizing what arrogance left behind. At 9:20 p.m. Madison called, delight crackling through the speaker. "You'll love this," she said. "Victor's parachute just melted." She forwarded a PDF of his employment agreement. The morality clause voided all severance if the executive engaged in conduct materially harmful to corporate reputation. Millions had already looped "Where's Neil" deal. That satisfied the threshold. Counsel agreed, redirecting his severance, ironically, to the fair wage pool. I leaned back, savoring justice with surgical symmetry. Victor clipped my wings. Now he fell from cruising altitude without silk or strings, while the people he'd plotted to purge floated upward on money he'd never see. Righteous satisfaction settled in my chest like well-earned triumph. Bright and immovable. 1 week later. The elevator doors slid open at 8 a.m., and there he was, Victor Dane, red-eyed, clutching a cardboard box like it held the last crumbs of his legacy. His designer tie was gone, his shirt wrinkled. He looked smaller than I remembered, as if the weight of the world had finally realized where it belonged and settled on his shoulders. NetAxis had surged 12% in market cap since the live stream. Retail investors, many of whom had rage sold at the bottom, were cautiously trickling back in. Articles once skeptical of the Neil deal were now citing it as a case study in modern corporate resilience. I passed the morning checking pension dashboards. The fund for employees over 55 had officially locked at the safety threshold we'd aimed for. I skimmed the audit report twice, just to be sure. No gaps, no forgotten technicians, no lost matches, just numbers in green. It felt like planting something in winter and seeing green shoots in the frost. I didn't expect to run into Victor on my way out of the compliance wing, but there he was, by the elevator, alone, face hollowed. He didn't meet my eyes right away, but when he did, there wasn't anger, just collapse. "I made mistakes," he mumbled. "A second chance? That's all I'm asking." His voice cracked, barely audible over the low chime of the descending lift. I didn't blink, didn't frown, just answered evenly, almost gently. "Practice gratitude, Victor. It pays better than begging." The doors slid open behind me. I stepped in without turning back. As they closed, I caught his reflection in the brushed steel, still frozen in place. Lips parted like he had more to say, but finally understood silence was safer. Back at my office, I slid open the side drawer and pulled out the newest set of papers. Mirror Trust 2.0. Signed, notarized, quietly filed with the same securities firm that had once handled the original. This version renewed automatically every quarter, and unlike its predecessor, it didn't just protect me, it protected every employee who gave more than they took, who showed up when they were invisible, who bled loyalty into a system that too often gave nothing back. There were no fireworks, no press release, just one more page, quietly added to the blueprint of a company rebuilt from silence, foresight, and the memory of what nearly got lost. Justice didn't always shout. Sometimes, it waited for the right quarter, then clicked into place, permanent, precise, and beautifully quiet. And